Good afternoon and good evening, everybody. Welcome to Dirty Leather, another episode of Dirty Leather. I am your host, Jesse, along with my co host, Chris. We're going to bring you a little bit more action from the World Baseball Classic as well as spring training. And we also thank you for tuning in to another episode of Dirty Leather. We will have an announcement later at the end of the podcast just regarding the show. Don't worry, we're not going away. Just a couple of structural changes that we'll be doing going forward. But you'll still see us, obviously. But for right now, we're thankful that you're tuning in with us on this Sunday evening, which spring around the corner and the opening day about a week or two away. So a lot of baseball that's going to be coming up soon, a lot of baseball that's already ongoing, and a lot of games that are very shocking. We're going to get to that really, really soon later in this broadcast. Now, to start off with the broadcast, we are going to start with our weekly rants. So if you are new to the broadcast, the weekly rant is basically the part of the broadcast we say whatever it is that's on our mind. We talk about whatever it is in the baseball world, whether it be breaking news or something that we've seen or something in general that maybe we have a bone to pick with. So this is a time we rant, we talk about it, and we just get our thoughts out there. So, starting off with this weekly rant or this week's episode or edition of Weekly Rant, excuse me, we're going to be talking not about the Yankees, but about the World Baseball Classic and Team USA with regards to Tariq Skubal, the Detroit Tigers ace that is looking for his third Cy Young of his career and to continue his dominance or his reign of dominance in the entire American League as well as Major League Baseball. So, if you're not familiar with the news, Tariq Skubal pitched one game for Team USA during the tournament, and there was a bit of controversy and a little bit of talk with regards to whether or not he would leave Team USA after his one and only game. There were concerns. There was talk that he would stay, that he would not stay, that he would go back to camp. Maybe he'd stick around for the second game, but not pitch in it. Well, essentially, early on this week, he decided to step down from Team USA and go back to training camp for the Detroit Tigers to get ready for the upcoming season. That has prompted a lot of discussion online and a lot of nasty comments as well as a lot of comments that were quite interesting to see. So after Skubal left Team USA after a number of days, considering and mulling his future with the team, some were actually questioning his patriotism after leaving, and some of them were actually linking him to Benedict Arnold. Now, for any history knowers out there that are not in with baseball, Benedict Arnold is the most notorious spy slash traitor for the United States. If you want to call him a traitor, that's entirely that's up for debate. But we're not getting into politics on this podcast. That's what fans essentially compare Tariq Skubal to. Now, here's the thing, and I'm going to be as very careful and candid as I possibly can. I do not consider Tariq Skubal a traitor because he stepped down from Team USA. I think that's a little inconsiderate and that's a little loose with that term. But the decision is far more than that with regards to his decision to step down from the World Baseball Classic. It's more so of a sign of his character where he stands right now and his aim for free agency in 2027. My opinion is this: if you want to leave the team, if you want to leave Team USA so that you can focus on your team and your arm, make sure you don't blow it out before camp and ruin your value when you go into spring or into free agency next year, do so quietly and really just don't make a big spectrum about it or a big spectacle about it, excuse me. Don't dangle carrots or
Hmm.
fodder in front of the media, in front of cameras, in front of writers saying, oh, maybe I should stay. Oh, I really want to go. I don't want to put myself at risk. Just make your decision quietly, leave the team, and that is it. That really should be it. Now, the media bubble around that lasted about a month, and Scooble seems to kind of be relishing it a little bit more to a degree because it does seem to be giving him a little bit more attention, a little bit more pop in the media, so on and so forth, which all players really want to do. Let's be very frank about that. All players want to get their face in the media, and all the players really want to, make themselves the representative of the game. Don't forget, Tariq Skubal is on the players committee for the MLBPA for the upcoming CBA negotiations, which are going to be very important going forward. So we'll have to see what happens with that. But I did read a quote from him a couple of days ago where he talked to Jason Stark of The Athletic with regards to his decision, and the criticism that he found was that he essentially said, it's just not fair, referring to the criticism, but that's part of the business. It's part of the game. If they know me, though, and they don't know me on a personal level, and they know what my peers think of me, I don't think it's fair to say those things. Well, I actually look at that statement with a little bit of disdain, and I consider it a little bit immature. He absolutely knew that when he made that decision, it was going to cause a major fuss in the media and was going to cause a major fuss among Team USA supporters, because Team USA supporters are some of the most patriotic out there. And you put them on the same level as Japan, the Dominican Republic, Venezuela, so on and so forth. They are exceptionally patriotic.
Mm-hmm.
And when you step down and you step away from the World
Absolutely.
Baseball Classic in that manner, you know you're going to get hit with criticism. So to come out and then say it's just not fair, the amount of criticism or the nature of the criticism that I'm getting, reached me as a little immature and a little bit self-centered and a little bit egotistical
Mm-hmm.
in a way, as in I don't want to be touched. I don't want to be
Yeah.
judged for my decision. So I want to quietly slink back to my team. Now, another quote
Yeah.
that I had an issue with did not come from Tariq Skubal himself, but it actually came from Aaron Judge, the captain of the Yankees and one of the best ball players on the planet, arguably. He said, there's a risk with everything you do. And for him to take that risk and to come out here and be with us, the boys love it. I don't know exactly what he's talking about. I don't know what the quote unquote risk was. Was he talking about his contract that was going to be possibly $500 million? Was he worried about a potential injury that he may sustain during the World Baseball Classic, like we saw with Edwin Diaz 3 years ago when he was celebrating that a quarterfinals victory
Yeah.
and he ended up tearing his Achilles and lost the entire 2023 season. He was set to make $500 million, or he is set to make $500 million in the best market environment going into 2027. Lockout pending, obviously, but we'll get to that for another day. I just don't like these quotes. I think they're a little shallow, and I think it's a little, self-centered. Some of these quotes. Yes, you were taking a risk
Mm-hmm.
playing for Team USA, but if you're going to make a decision that large, if you're going to make a decision to jump into this tournament, you should either A, stick with your decision, or B, if you really, really feel like you want to protect yourself, just withdraw from the tournament and don't make a peep. That's really where I
Mm-hmm.
stand on this. So that's my rant for this week. Again, Tariq Skubal, I have no qualms with him. I have no issue with him whatsoever. But I feel like that this major media hubbubaloo about his WBC exit is really, really feeding into his ego, and I don't really like it. So that's my rant for this week. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Chris, with your rant.
Yeah, that's fair. So my rant also has to do with the WBC and Team USA. But I'm going a little bit in a different direction. As another thing caused a lot of stir over the last week, and that's Mark DeRosa's comments before the game against Italy and then after the game against Italy. As I'm sure many people have heard by now,
Mm-hmm.
he went on pregame and made comments about how the USA had already clinched the pool, and so essentially the game didn't matter. The Italy game didn't matter. As we know, we went on to be upset by Italy and then had to bite our teeth, hoping for whatever would happen between Italy and Mexico. As it turns out, I think we fell sort of rear end backwards into probably the best possible scenario, but that's for discussion later on in the thing. But I want to sort of focus on his comments, because afterwards he sort of came out and gave equally perplexing explanations. And his explanation was sort of, well, I didn't really mean that we had it locked up. I just meant that we were playing so well that there was no possible way we could lose the game, and therefore we had it locked up. And then he went on to explain his lineup changes, which many people read to be that he thought things were already locked up and he benched all his starters and put in the backups because, like many teams do at the end of the season before the playoffs, right? And he tried to explain it away as actually all these moves were what I thought were best for the team. And, Bryce Harper's sitting was really better, and this and that. And so many people don't know the exact rules behind coaching for the World Baseball Classic, right? And it's very similar to the FIFA World Cup, where nobody who is holding a job, a separate job in baseball, can be the coach for the national team because it's considered a quote full-time job, right? And so obviously we couldn't get the pick of the litter here. The vast majority of some of the best coaches in the game are obviously running MLB teams right now, and therefore they can't be the coach for Team USA, right? And so we already are a bit lacking as far as coaches we could look for. Obviously, Bruce Bochy might have been nice, but he's, A, older, and B, had just left the Rangers, so it would be hard to sort of throw that on his plate, right? But even with all that said, gosh, are those concerning comments by a national team coach. They just are. Either he truly had no idea how the tournament worked and really did think that they had it locked up and now has to make up some excuse, right? That's option one, which is obviously incredible incompetence. It certainly makes me nervous about how he's prepping the team, and thankfully he's loaded with so many stars that coaching may or may not matter all that much anyways, or option B is the second thing he said was true, and he's just so incredibly cocky that he completely underestimates the teams he's going against. Right? There's only two options here. And the second one is just as bad, right? You don't want that in a manager either. You should never be overlooking any team. And as we saw, Italy, should not have been overlooked if that really was what ended up happening here, right? So either way, it's an incredibly bad look for Team USA. And it does raise a lot of concerns for me going up against some of these good teams that they're going to be facing now. Dominican Republic and then one of either Italy or Venezuela if they make it that far. Right? Do I think in a close game that they have the coaching that knows how to manage that situation? At this point, no, I don't believe that. And it's because of the comments he made. And that is really concerning and too bad because it would be a real disappointment if USA underperformed here, given that, especially with the Japan upset, as we'll talk about later, especially with that, they seem poised to win this tournament, right? And they should win this tournament. And so anything other than that is going to be a disappointment. And I'm going to lay it largely at the feet of DeRosa here, if that is what ultimately ends up happening.
Yeah, definitely. And, just to kind of piggyback off of that, I did hear those comments from Mark DeRosa. Number one, there's no excuse to not know that you don't know the rules of the game. You should have known going into this game that you were not clinched, that you needed this game to clinch, and you needed to perform as good as you possibly could. Now, Team Italy, which we'll get to in a second, is a really surprising team, and they're poised to possibly go in the finals. But again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But there's no excuse to not know. Number two, I just personally believe Mark DeRosa was not the best choice to be the manager for Team USA. I think you have to have somebody that at least knows the game, at least a more modernized version of the game, unfortunately. Now, who that might be, there's a bunch of names. I personally cannot come up with one, unfortunately, but Mark DeRosa is not it. The closest that Mark DeRosa has gotten to the field within the last 10 years, essentially, is through MLB Network. That's really about it. And the same thing with how Aaron Boone became the manager of the Yankees. Sat up in the ESPN broadcast booth, sounded good on television, became the Yankees manager, and he's been polarizing ever since. So that's my honest opinion. There's no excuse. You have to know where your team stands. You have to know the rules of the tournament. You have to know where you stand, what you need to do, and how you have to win. If you don't, you're going to lose badly, and you're going to underperform. And they almost lost and sank out of the entire tournament, even before getting into the quarterfinals, which would have been a complete embarrassment. Absolute embarrassment. Now, moving on to the next portion of our broadcast, we are going to talk about the summary of the World Baseball Classic pool play. And here are the statistics, and here are the standings for each and every individual pool from the World Baseball Classic. So we will start off with Pool A. Obviously, that is one of the big boy pools. That is Canada, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Colombia, and Panama. Now, one of the reasons I say big boy pools is because Puerto Rico has been quite a nice watch, and Canada also almost upset the United States and had a small comeback in the quarterfinals, which we'll get to. But Puerto Rico, excuse me, has had a great run. Canada had a good run as well. They were stopped in the quarterfinals. Obviously, Cuba, Colombia, and Panama all sank out of the tournament, and unfortunately will not be playing in the bracket and have not played in the bracket. Now, Pool B, which is the most interesting one of the bunch, arguably, Italy, the United States, Mexico, Great Britain, and Brazil. Brazil, unfortunately, they failed to win any game, but they did have Lucas Ramirez, the son of Manny Ramirez, who performed relatively well during this tournament and should easily be
Mhm.
on the MLB Pipeline's top 30 for the Los Angeles Angels when they update those rankings going into the 2026 regular season. I think you're going to see a little bit more of his name pop up. You might see him in a trade deadline haul, possibly in July, August, somewhere around there. But that's a team to consider. That's a name to consider. Great Britain won a game, actually, and then very great for Great Britain. I watched Great Britain in 2023, like I mentioned in the last episode last week. Very happy they at least won a game. Mexico, very hard fought team, very hard fought. Definitely there was a scare there in that last game pool play between Italy and Mexico, but for the United States, they did end up getting saved by the same team that almost eliminated them the game before. So, talking about the United States in that Italy game, don't forget that the United States lost to Italy 8-6, despite a comeback attempt late in that game where they scored a couple of runs. It looked like they might actually pull up a win and go to the bottom part of that bracket, which would have been Pool B winner instead of Pool B runner up. Unfortunately, Nolan McLean struggled throughout that entire game, and batting really struggled to get off of, believe it or not, Michael Lorenzen, the new pitcher for the Colorado Rockies. So the Rockies should be very happy with Lorenzen's performance in that one. And then about a day or two later, Italy beat Mexico again 9-1 in a game that the USA needed Italy to win to secure a spot in the playoffs as the runner-up. So Italy did phenomenal work. They were a phenomenal team at the end of pool play, and they were a surprise team this year. They went 32-11 score-wise, led by really good hitting from Vinny Pascantillo from the Royals, Kyle Teal from the White Sox, Jack Caglione also from the Royals. So really, really good stuff. And again, pitching led by Michael Lorenzen from the Rockies. Sam Aldergary, who is one of the prospects that's actually been on the radar during the World Baseball Classic. 3 ERA over 6 innings and 9 strikeouts to 4 walks, no home runs allowed. And Dylan DeLucia, who is also a very decent prospect. I can't remember which team it was, but he's a name that's popped up. So Pool C, obviously, Japan dominated that entire pool and really looked poised to go all the way, which we'll get to in a moment. But a really heartbreaking loss for Australia in that pool for Pool C when it looked like that they were primed for a Cinderella run if they were able to limit Korea to only 6 runs and keep that margin of difference within 4 runs. But unfortunately, a horrible throwing error at shortstop by Jared Dale cost them a run and cost them a spot in the bracket, which was heartbreaking for the Australian team because really had some good players. They don't forget they had a Travis Bazzana on that team, which was a previous number one draft pick in 2023 or 2024. So he was fun to watch. And then for Pool D, Dominican Republic and Venezuela going head to head in the quarterfinals as well. Dominican Republic was very strong. They were exceptional this time around. 41-10
Mhm.
run difference, with the same record as Japan. And Venezuela also the same. Very good hitting, quite some decent pitching. So really just a great, great World Baseball Classic all around. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been very exciting. And I admit, last week's podcast I said, the games have been great, but it's pretty much been what I expected. I mean, most of the teams that I see near the top are basically the teams I would expect to see near the top. And then this last week is sort of totally shaken up the dynamic and decided to prove me completely wrong, which I appreciate always. But no, I think it's been a great tournament so far. I love seeing teams like Canada have a shot. I do think the Australia game was heartbreaking, but I think it just proves that they're there ready to go, and that they're going to be a force moving forward, which is exciting for them. You like seeing teams that you don't, always expect to have there. Oftentimes, with baseball, similar to a lot of the international tournaments, basketball, same thing where it's a lot of the same few countries just time and time again, and the more we can get more outreach to more teams becoming competitive, I think the better it is for the sport. And so it's nice to
Yeah.
see, those teams, beginning to show some excitement there. Obviously a few years ago we had the Netherlands was another team that was there. They didn't show quite the same. We brought up Czech, was another team that we were hoping for this year. Maybe didn't pan out the way we had hoped, but there's definitely some things to root for, even out of the teams that got eliminated, And then, I mean, we'll move into. We haven't talked about the most recent games yet, so I won't talk totally about the upsets, but there's certainly some real excitement happening, moving into the Final Four here that I can't wait to talk about, and I think it's exciting for fans of the sport. I mean, yeah, obviously fans of the teams that have been upset probably aren't so thrilled, but I think fans of the sport in general, you love an underdog story, and I think we've got
Yes.
a couple, one especially obviously, but maybe even a couple going on here right now that are pretty exciting to be seeing, as we move forward here. So.
Right, definitely. Again, a lot of Cinderella stories, a lot of underdog stories, and that's going to
Mhm.
move us on to the quarterfinals. So, going back to last week's broadcast, this was going to be the bracket, the tournament format, excuse me, for the World Baseball Classic. Again, you saw all the setups there. You saw all the potential um, setups that you could have possibly seen. This is what it looks like at the moment now. And obviously, we've got to talk about this. We have to go into this a little bit more, and that being the loss from the Japanese loss in the quarterfinals.
Mhm.
What an unbelievable game, and what an unbelievable shakeup to that entire tournament. Because don't forget, I did say that Japan was going to be one of the two teams playing in the finals. I thought it was going to be a 2023 rematch between the United States. That's obviously not going to be the case.
Mhm.
And again, just going back to that game, you saw a lot. And it looked like Japan, even at one point, looked like that they were poised to run away with it relatively fast. They went up, I believe, 5-1 very quickly against Venezuela. You had an Otani home run, you had a Sato double to right, and then you had a Morishita home run when you had
Mhm.
Otani, lead off everything essentially with a base hit. Or I can't remember exactly if it
Mhm.
was a base hit or a walk, but that got the scoring started in the third. And it looked like that the team was poised to run away with it. Oh, excuse me, 5-2. Excuse me. They had a Venezuela had a Cunha home run and then a Gleyber Torres double to right where Ezekiel
Mhm.
Tovar scored. But then later in that game, when Yamamoto, who pitched great in that game, was
Mhm.
pulled, they turned to a couple of their bullpen pieces, and their bullpen really fell apart. Let's be really clear on that. First in the fifth inning, you had a Garcia. I believe that's yes, a Garcia home run to left center where you had Churrillo score, and then you had Willier Abreu, and obviously Red Sox fans were really, really happy to see that, hitting a
Mhm.
home run to right field, scoring Ezekiel Tovar and Gleyber Torres, putting
Mhm.
Venezuela up 7-5 in the sixth inning, and then their bullpen was fantastic. De Jesus, Buto, Zerpa, Machado, and then Palencia to close everything out. They locked down the Japanese team quite significantly, basically around nothing to get on base. Only had two
Mhm.
hits or four hits after a bad start by Ranger Suarez, and just a
Mhm.
really, really great game. And Tovar even added an insurance run after Tanishi for Japan threw the ball away on a pickoff error, and Tovar was able to score. So just a shocking upset for Japan, and just a complete another shakeup for this entire tournament. And I know a lot of people bet on Japan to win it, so they're obviously very upset with the outcome of that. And then now moving on to Italy and Puerto Rico. And don't forget, like we said, Italy is poised possibly for that Cinderella run that we all love to watch. And Italy did really, really good for the first half of that game, for the first four innings. Cascatillo, Canzoni, Caglianone, uh, Diorazio, all having, small hits, sacrifice fly to go up 4-1 against Puerto Rico. And
Mhm.
then you had Fischer double, and then you had Durazio hitting another ground rule double, also scoring Caglione. So you really had a lot of offense in that game. And then you had Puerto
Absolutely.
Rico try to storm back with Rosario with a grounder in the fielder's choice. Then you had Rivera scoring on a wild pitch. And then Christian Vasquez singling to right, scoring two. And it looked like that they might tie that game at the top of the eighth
Mhm.
inning. Unfortunately, they
Mhm.
were not able to get anything off of Greg Weissert, the former Yankee and the current Red Sox, believe it or not. So the Red Sox fans are really eating good during this tournament. They have a lot of players in
Oh,
that tournament that have performed fantastic. So it's a really great
you love to
sleeper.
see it.
Yeah, you love to see it. That's coming from the Red Sox fan in this stream. So really, really great tournament play all around. And then going over to the other side of the tournament, obviously the United States beating Canada 5-3. Pete Crow Armstrong singling the center, Schwarber, having a nice little force out score to get things going. Bregman reaching on an infield single. You did have Bo Naylor also homering the right center to bring it 5-3. But the American pitching was very, very strong, especially their bullpen after Keller left. You had Gabe Spear, you had Dave Bednar, also a Yankee, Garrett Whitlock, another Red Sox, and then Mason Riller striking out the side in the ninth inning to close it out against Canada. So they move on to,
Mhm.
to the semifinals, and they will be playing against the Dominican Republic. And the Dominican Republic, like I mentioned, very, very strong offensive team, demolished Korea in 7 innings, 10-0, mercy rule. You even had Austin Wells closing out the game with a 3-run home run to send the game into the
Mhm.
mercy rule. Again, you had Guerrero Jr., you had Machado, you had Tatis Jr., Junior Habanero, also all scoring. Cattell Marte, just really dominant performance from the Dominican Republic. So, really interesting
Mhm.
setup here for the semifinals. And if you want my projection, I think the United States and the Dominican Republic game will come down to the eighth or ninth inning, and whoever scores first or
Mhm.
whoever puts up the most runs, regardless of whether you're trailing, will win because they will have the momentum on their side,
Mhm.
and it's a completely different ball game than if they were playing in the World Series or the Championship Series. This is the World Baseball Classic.
Mhm.
Things are totally different in that. And then flipping over to the Italy and Venezuela game, I believe that Italy will pull off an upset and they will go to the finals. So, if you want my honest opinion, I believe that the United States may squeak out a win against the Dominican Republic. It's very hard to say, but I believe that Italy will be there. So I would say that it will be the United States versus Italy. United States just on the back of pitching alone and some of their power in their lineup. And we're going to get a United States Italy rematch for the final, which is going to be quite amazing to see. What do you think, Chris? What are you thinking?
Yeah, so this has all been very interesting. I like all you said, and just really quickly, I just want to thank you, as a Yankee fan, for giving us Narvaez and Whitlock and Weiss. You know,
Yes.
because it was very kind of you to gift all three of them to us, like you did. But no, I mean I did. It is funny because we actually in Red Sox world, we've been talking a lot about how impressive so many of our players have looked. You know, I mean, we didn't even talk about for the U.S. Jaron Duran and Roman Anthony have
Yeah.
looked great for the U.S. as well. You know, two big things that we really need to see. You know, so that's been great, especially given our actual team hasn't looked so great in spring training. The team that's stayed behind. So it's nice to see the rest of our guys performing well. In terms of specific teams, I mean your predictions. You know, I pretty much agree with. I think Japan going home was utterly stunning. That's the upset I was really talking about, you know, because I said they were easily right up there for one of, if not the best team in the league. And so seeing them go down as early as they did I mean, I maybe could have seen them being upset in the semifinals, but going out in the quarterfinals was shocking. But testament to Venezuela, I mean, they
Yeah.
played a heck of a game, and really their pitching was what stood out for me because I did not expect their pitching to be able to hold Japan the way that they did. Ranger
Yes.
Suarez, had some bumps in the road there, but he held his own, and that bullpen really, really did what they had to do. So kudos to them. And I give them a shot against Italy. I mean, I do pick Italy to win that game. I just think Italy hasn't lost to anybody, and underestimating them at this point, would be foolish. I mean, I think on paper, if I was looking purely on paper, I'd probably say Venezuela's lineup is deeper, and therefore I think they would win. But I can't count Italy out because they've just been overperforming on that pitching side, especially, but their offense has been electric too, and so I do think Italy's going to continue their Cinderella run there. Now, in terms of the USA versus Dominican, I think if any team in the tournament can match up to Dominican's offense, it is the United States. And we recently just found out today, actually, that he is, DeRosa made a decent decision here and is actually benching both Cal Raleigh and Alex Bregman, who have both struggled mightily, two of the only bats in the U.S. lineup that has truly struggled. He's benching both of them for Gunnar Henderson, who's had a great tournament the limited time he's been allowed to play. And then also Will Smith will be in that lineup as well, which I think deepens that lineup, makes it a little bit more electric. We'll see, if there's any rust for either of those players coming in, being thrust into that game. But I think if any offense can match what the Dominican Republic can throw at you, it is the United States. And then pitching wise, I've said from the beginning, I think USA's pitching is right on par with, at the time I thought Japan's. I thought they were 1-2 with pitching and the two best in the tournament. So I do have USA beating Dominican, but I will say, despite the fact we've talked so well about the US bullpen and how it's improved over their last tournament, they've given up some runs towards the end of games. They've made a few of these games closer than they needed to be. Some of the teams have made some comebacks on them. They haven't been able to necessarily complete the comeback, testimony to the U.S. for locking it down. But if this game, instead of having a 4 or 5 run cushion going into the later innings, if they only have a 1 or 2 run cushion, that could be concerning for the U.S. I mean, I don't know if their bullpen is as locked down as I had hoped it was, so we'll see how that plays out. I also don't think the Dominicans is as locked down as, they would like it to be either. So I think that could be interesting. But I do have it being a rematch of USA-Italy, and I think that'll be a fun rematch too, because with Italy, if that does in fact happen, they'll be the last undefeated team left. Right, and they'd be going against USA, who has something to prove now, losing to Italy the first time, almost completing that comeback, so that could be a fun one to watch. And how interesting would that be, the two teams coming out of it, that same pool being the final two, it would be quite interesting to watch as well. So we'll see what happens, but I think a USA-Italy rematch is what's on the table for us here.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. Actually, as we were talking, the lineups for the United States and the Dominican Republic just came out along with the starting
Okay.
pitchers. So tonight, it will be a matchup, at least of starting pitchers, between Paul Skeens and Luis Severino for the Dominican Republic. Luis Severino being the pitcher for a former Yankee, also the current pitcher for the Athletics, the Sacramento Athletics, if you want to call them that. The United States lineup is as follows. Bobby Witt Jr. will lead off alongside Bryce Harper in the second spot, Judge and Schwarber in the 3 and 4 spots, respectively. Gunnar Henderson in the number 5 with Will Smith catching in the 6th spot. You will have Roman Anthony Pierce, the number 7 guy, in left field. Bryce Turang is the number 8 guy in second base. And Pete Crow Armstrong, the speedy center fielder from the Chicago Cubs, at the 9th spot. Now, with regards to the Dominican Republic lineup, it's also very interesting. You will have Fernando Tatis Jr. leading off, as with Ketel Marte and Juan Soto in the number 2 and 3 spots, respectively. Guerrero Jr. playing cleanup, the Toronto Blue Jay, that everybody's happy is still there. At least Toronto fans are happy that they're still there.
Mm-hmm.
Manny Machado at the number 5 spot with Junior Caminero at the number 6 slot. With that immense power, those 40 home runs he hit at the age of 22, which is very hard to do in the major leagues. Julio Rodriguez at number 7. Austin Wells, the Yankees catcher that shocked a lot of people by going to play for the Dominican Republic because we were not expecting that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
He's playing at number 8, and Gerardo Pedromo at 9 playing short. So really, really interesting lineup. It almost seems like an equal lineup. Maybe the
Mm-hmm.
power advantage slightly goes to the United States, but it's very, very small power lineup, especially when you have Habanero, Machado, Guerrero, Soto, Tatis leading off. And don't forget, the
Yeah.
Dominican Republic in their last 5 games, they've scored double digit runs 4 times: 12, 12,
Mm-hmm.
10, 7, and 10 the last 5 games. That's runs, by the way. So that's
Mm-hmm.
essentially almost, I think it's about 50 runs in the last five
Mm-hmm.
games. The United States has struggled to, get up to 35, 40 runs. So it's really interesting. Now, the question is, can Luis Severino play well against the United States? Because Luis Severino has had a tendency to struggle. As a Yankee
Mm-hmm.
fan, I saw it firsthand where he had issues with giving up the long ball, locating his pitches, executing his pitches. That's number one. Number two, if the Dominican Republic go down in a hole early, which they really haven't found themselves in that much this entire tournament, do they come back strong? What's their response to it?
Yeah.
That's the concern I wanted. That's the number one thing I want to see what they answer. Now, for the Venezuela and Italy game tomorrow, we don't have lines for that yet, but it will be Kiter Montero, the pitcher for the Detroit Tigers, one of the pitchers for the Detroit Tigers, against Michael Lorenzen, once again for Italy taking the bump in the semifinals. So a very
Mm-hmm.
interesting game there. Italy won their last five, and Venezuela has won 4 of their last 5. They did lose to the Dominican Republic 7-5, but Italy does have a slight advantage in the department in terms of their offensive consistency because they have not scored not less than 6 runs in their last 5 games, or any of their last 5 games for that matter. They've been very strong offensively. Pitching wise, may be a little iffy because they do have a tendency to give up a couple of runs, but really interesting setups for both of these games, especially the game tonight, which will happen at 8 o'clock tonight. USA versus the Dominican Republic. Must watch baseball for everybody. So, what do you think? Do you
Absolutely.
think that the United States? Do you think that the United States is going to beat the Dominican Republic? Do you think that Italy is going to top Venezuela, given that given what we know about these lineups for the next couple of days?
Yeah, I feel like that's my guess, and like I said before, I think the real difference here, especially with USA and the Dominican, is that pitching. I mean, that pitching
Yeah.
matchup tonight, is very skewed. No disrespect to Luis Severino, who certainly had a solid career. He's no slouch or anything by any stretch of the imagination. But I just think, compared to what we're trotting out there, he is clearly the lesser of the two. And when those two lineups are as electric as they are, pitching really is gonna matter a lot. And I think the USA does have the edge there. It's
Yep.
interesting, I wouldn't say either pitcher going in the Venezuela or Italy matchup is particularly, lights out. I think either one of them could give up some runs there. And Venezuela's lineup is certainly tough. We saw that against, Japan. They can score some runs. They can hit some home runs. They're not to be underestimated. But like I said, I can't, I can't pick against Italy until they give me a reason to, and they just keep
Yep.
finding ways to win. No matter who it is, that they're playing, they find ways to win, and so that's why I have to pick them. But that could be a relatively high scoring game, I think, on that end of it. I mean, we're talking about the USA and Dominican Republic being a high scoring game, but I wouldn't be shocked for the other one to be high scoring as well.
Yeah.
Given the pitching matchup and the offenses that have played. So we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. Both of these games have the potential to be very high scoring. especially the U.S. Dominican Republic game, just given the sheer amount of star power
Mm-hmm.
on both lineups. So we might see,
Mm-hmm.
20 runs being scored cumulatively before it's over. Now, who goes
Absolutely.
home and who goes to the finals is to be determined, but it's going to
Mm-hmm.
be a really interesting watch. It's going to come down probably to the wire unless some team just starts pounding one of the other very early
Absolutely.
on. So before we move on to the next segment of our broadcast, there are a couple of players I did want to, point out that could be worth watching per my own views and also per the MLB community's views. One of them
Mm-hmm.
is Dante Nori, who's the Phillies, one of the Phillies' top prospects. I believe he was number 80 for the top 100, if I'm not mistaken, for MLB Pipeline. I'm fairly certain of that. I'm sorry, he's number 7. I'm thinking about somebody else. Excuse me, but he's the number 7 prospect for the Phillies, who played for Team Italy. Had a very strong World Baseball Classic, 438, 474, 875 slash line with 2 home runs. He has struggled in spring training quite significantly, but he had um, a great World Baseball Classic. He grades a little bit above average in hitting, grades quite high in run as well as fielding. So he might be a defensive outfielder to watch going forward. Owen Casey, another one that was highly touted going into the World Baseball Classic, the number 42 prospect on the MLB Pipeline's top 100. He also had a relatively strong World Baseball Classic, 7 for 17, I believe, with a couple of extra base hits. Very speedy outfielder. Has some pretty good power. He grades into the 60 per MLB Pipeline, as well as
Mm-hmm.
60 for his arm. So he has a very strong arm and a very strong bat as well. We did see that a little bit during the World Baseball Classic. Enrique Bradfield Jr. This is an interesting one. Enrique Bradfield Jr. is a very fun prospect to watch. He's very fast. He has Chandler Simpson levels of speed. He is one of the top prospects for the Baltimore Orioles that it seems like a lot of people are sleeping on. He was talked about quite significantly a year or two ago before they drafted Ike Irish. Then you saw Nate George being drafted and popping up out of nowhere. Then you saw Dylan Beavers pop up as well. So he's kind of fallen to the wayside, but he has some crazy speed. He grades it at an 80, which is the maximum. So you are seeing possibly a Chandler Simpson player for the Orioles. You did see a little speed from him in the World Baseball Classic. Not a lot, but he did have a stolen base during that tournament. And then Elmer Rodriguez is the fourth and final one for me, and Elmer Rodriguez is the number 82 prospect for the MLB Pipeline Top 100, also a Yankee as well. Uh, Pitched quite good during his time in the World Baseball Classic. And he's also had a pretty strong spring as well. He did have a strong spring start, got to the World Baseball Classic, has been quite good. I believe he's had 14 strikeouts for
Mm-hmm.
this entire tournament, which is not something that you really see in a World Baseball Classic. You might see, one strikeout to one inning, but you don't see more than that. So he's made a name for himself, and we'll talk about him and where he will fit in probably later in the broadcast. But
Mm-hmm.
those are some players that I think that are really worth watching going forward after the World Baseball Classic. Has any player caught your mind, Chris?
I mean, I'll be honest, I haven't gotten a chance to watch every team as closely as I would have hoped, with my work schedule. I do think Elmer Rodriguez Cruz has been exciting for you guys, the Yankees. And I
Yeah,
will say, when we gave him up to you guys, because he was in our system, that was a hard one for me because I did actually predict him to have a pretty good career. I was higher on him than a lot of
yeah,
people were. So while I'm both happy for him, it's also a bit of a it hurts my heart, knowing that we could have had him as well, but good for
yeah,
him. But I would just say, and this isn't so much of a out there prediction, but I mentioned it briefly before, but Roman Anthony's World Baseball Classic so far, I mean, people forget how young he still is, and this is going to be his first full season with the Red Sox. And I've talked many times about how the Red Sox, the one thing they didn't do was address their power, and how that was lacking in their lineup. And what I've seen from Roman Anthony has made me very happy. And I think that the rest of the league is about to see why Roman Anthony was number one number one ranked prospect. I think he did great last year. I don't think he had the power that everybody expected him to yet. But he started to show that in the World Baseball Classic, and I'm hoping to see that will translate this season. And if it does, watch out, because he's going to be something special. He really is. So
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's the one player that I would also consider watching. There was a lot of young players that were really
hmm
worth the World Baseball Classic just in those alone. Because
yeah,
wow, we're seeing a lot of the young players,
hmm
step up for their home countries and really just perform
yeah,
at a high level. Really amazing to see.
absolutely.
Okay, so now moving on to our next segment of the broadcast, really quickly. Uh, we're going to talk about spring training a little bit and some of the roster cuts that have been happening recently. The Yankees have been making some roster trimmings a little bit during this time of spring training. There is one that I really did not like, and that was the decision to cut Spencer Jones and put him back to minor league
Mm,
camp. Uh,
mm,
that shows you um, that entire outfield is log jammed, because if
hmm
in an ideal scenario you would have likely seen Spencer Jones go to the big leagues after this, because he's had a strong spring. He has cut down his strikeout rate somewhat, still relatively high, but just not a really great um,
hmm
decision by the Yankees, and it really shows you that Trent Grisham qualifying offer signing did so much damage to that roster in terms of space,
hmm
because now they have no option, they have nowhere to put Spencer Jones, and where do you put
hmm
Jason Dominguez at this point? And if he struggles, do you option him back to AAA? What do you do with him
hmm
at that point? And then another one that
Absolutely.
happened also on March 9th that I actually was not aware of is that Elmer Rodriguez was optioned to
Hmm?
AAA again, which I find very interesting,
Okay.
especially after his performance in the World Baseball Classic. He was
hmm
very strong in the World Baseball Classic, and
He
Luis
was.
Gil got blown up today, essentially during his start against the Orioles, or I believe against the Orioles in a split squad. And they're going to
hmm
have to make a decision on him quickly. I don't think he stays on the major league roster because he struggled with command and control. So, do you
hmm
bring Elmer Rodriguez back up? Do you send Luis Gil to AAA? That's an interesting one. I really don't
hmm
understand that, but they did make some other cuts as well that we did think were gonna happen. We did see a couple of guys. I'm just trying to pull up my notes here because they've been cutting a lot of guys and they haven't updated yet. They did send Marco Luciano and Brennan Shoemake down to AAA. They did send a couple of other guys, a couple of pitchers as well. Kyle Carr, who is a mid-level prospect for the Yankees, also went down to minor league camp. Just a couple of guys, a couple moves here and there.
Yeah.
Veteran guys going back to the minors that they need to be called back up in the future. But those two decisions really just I just don't
hmm
understand those. And they need pitching for at least the first month. Because don't forget, Cole and Rodon are out recovering from surgery, respectively. And they need pitching to go. And what's going to happen with Luis Heel if he has to go back in the starting rotation? And he got, like I said, he got blown up today from a disastrous spring training start. So it's very interesting. What do you
hmm
think, Chris? What have you seen with your roster cuts? Did you like anybody that was cut? Did you have any qualms with your moves?
Yeah, there haven't been any shocking cuts for the Red Sox, I wouldn't say. And I didn't know if there would be. I mean, I've sort of said from the beginning that the majority of this roster seems pretty set, with the exception of maybe a couple bullpen pieces still in flux. Maybe the back end of that bench in flux, especially in the infield. But and of course they have to figure out who the fifth starter is going to be out of the four possible options they have there, maybe even five possible options they have there right now. So there hasn't been a lot of competition there, and in fact, if I look at some of the projected rosters as of right now for the Red Sox, they don't have anybody that's a non-roster invitee in that projection at all. The closest quote upset you could see, I guess, would be Ryan Watson, who was their Rule 5 draft pick, and so obviously he would have to make the roster if they want to keep him. But outside of that, and especially now, so one of the cuts I did want to highlight, that they made with Jeremy Wu Yeeland. Was sent down back to AAA. He's a left-handed pitcher, and there was a little bit of talk that he could be one because they don't have a lot of left-handed pitchers in camp right now. The only other one outside of their starting pitchers that they have is Tyler Semeniego, right? And he's on the 40-man roster, so
Yep.
he's obviously an option over Wu Yeeland. But there was some conversation about the left-handed pitching, out until they went and signed Danny Cullum, they just signed. I thought a fantastic signing, by the way. I think that's a great signing for the Red Sox. It's exactly what they needed. But I think that sort of eliminated the need for any other left-handed pitching. So it's not a surprise to see Wu Yeeland go down. The only other marginal surprise, I guess, would be Jacob Webb. I don't think he had a particularly great spring, and he hasn't looked phenomenal in AAA either. And so it's not totally shocking, but there was some conversation there about whether he would be a potential bullpen piece for the Red Sox. And he was in the first round of cuts there. So I guess that could be sort of a minor surprise. But by and large, there's just not a lot of room to move on this Red Sox roster right now. I think what's more interesting than the people who were cut are the people who haven't been cut yet. I think that gives a little bit more intrigue, and I think that's the next segment, right? About people who, are still in camp that we might be seeing. I mean, it's very interesting that they have caught not a single infielder on the Red Sox NRIs, except for I think Ronald Rizzo. No, not even, because he's a catcher. So they have not caught a single infielder out of their their major league camp. And we talked about that a little bit with some concern about the depth of that infield, and I think they're sort of showing that a little bit as well by the fact that all of them are still in camp. So that's been interesting. And then a couple other bullpen pitchers I had mentioned. Wyatt Olds is somebody that's an interesting one, who's had a pretty decent minor league career for the Red Sox and could be an interesting piece at the end of that bullpen. And then, of course, I mentioned last week, Noah Song. He is still in camp, and I think he's a great upside bullpen piece for them if he's figured it all out and gotten some of that rust off from the layoff he had, and the injuries he had. So that's another interesting one, and obviously, of course, they haven't made any indication whatsoever what they're doing with that fifth spot in the rotation. They made indication on the entire rest of the rotation. They made it very clear Garrett Crochet is the number one. They announced today Sonny Gray is the number two. You've got Ranger Suarez as the number three. You've got Bayo as the number four. That's locked in at this point. But they have made really no indication on which way they're leaning for that fifth spot. So I think, they're sort of holding their cards close to their chest right now with those last few spots they have left. Like with when you mentioned Spencer Jones going down, that's a pretty big indicator right there for the Yankees. And I don't think the Red Sox have really made any moves that indicate anything. I think they're going to draw it out as long as humanly possible and try to get as long of a look at some of these guys as possible before they make their final decision. So I don't know if we're going to know anything until right before the end of camp, but we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. And we do have a comment here from Linda Brayton telling us great insights. Thank you very much, Linda. That your comment is very deeply appreciated. It's just what we love to do, we love talking about baseball. And we just it's just something we just love. So thank you again for your comment. Okay, so moving on to the last part of our broadcast. We are going to talk a little bit about the AL East and the projections going forward, because some of those projections have come out. Peacock, excuse me, as well as Fangraphs have come out with some of their stat projections, as well as some of their standings projections as well. So, of course, me being the Yankees fan and Chris being the Red Sox fan, we might as well start with the AL East and just cover it for this broadcast. So, with regards to the Fangraphs 2026 projected standings, they do have, surprisingly, the Yankees winning it. Now, it is still quite tight. It is a baseline, so they do have the Yankees winning at least 87 games to 75 losses, one game better than the Blue Jays and the Red Sox, so they are suggesting that it will be very tight. with regards to that with the division. Excuse me. They do have the Orioles coming in at a close fourth at 84 and 78. So they have made some building on their roster, which we'll get to in a moment. And they do have the Rays ranked last at 81 and 81, about 500 team. So with Picada, they also do have similar statistics, but they have Toronto at 88.9 simulated wins to New York's 88.6. So it would likely be a repeat of last year's standings where Toronto did win the AL East based on a tiebreaker. And they do have Baltimore at number three as well. They have Boston at number four, which is very interesting to me, which we'll get to in a moment, at 82.2 simulated wins. And Tampa Bay a 1.1 simulated wins. I think people are indeed sleeping on Baltimore because they have made some significant upgrades to their lineup. Don't forget they got Pete Alonso, they have Taylor Ward in the outfield. They now have Blaze Alexander to substitute for the injured Jackson Holiday. They did make some pretty significant upgrades to their rotation as well with Chris Bassett, as well as Shane Baz. And they also did upgrade with Ryan Helsley in the bullpen as well with Felix Bautista. And it does seem like Khris did jump off a little bit. It's unfortunate, but that's okay. They do have. Oh, here he comes. We just bring him back on. They have a couple of injured guys in Felix Bautista, Colin Selby, and Andrew Kittredge. And they do have Jordan Westbrook, who is injured, who is a large tier utility player. So I think people are sleeping on the Baltimore Orioles a little bit. I still believe it will come down to the Yankees and the Blue Jays, but I don't see the Red Sox finishing outside of third place, to be honest with you. I think they're a very solid team. They have very young players, and they have a lot of potential. Their boom bust is very high, and I think with what we've seen from some of these younger players in the World Baseball Classic, they are looking like it's going to be a boom year. So that's my honest opinion for the AL East. I believe that it will come down to the Yankees and Blue Jays, but I still believe that the Red Sox are a dark horse, and the Orioles don't count them out either. Yes, the Rays have Chandler Simpson, they have Junior Caminero, still very young players, but they still need a core built around them. That's my honest opinion. What do you think, Khris? Do you agree with my sentiment? Do you have any other changes that you want to make?
Yeah, well, so I will first say that I've always found that the projection system don't like. I apologize. So I don't know if you can hear me or not.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, it cut out for a second. Anyway, so but I think a lot of that has to do with the boom bust mentality of them. A, the youth of the team, you know, right? It just a little bit harder to predict. And B, the fact that the team doesn't have a lot of that power, right? They're relying a lot on hits and their on base percentages and their ability to their contact rates and all things like that is sort of how the Red Sox offense operates, and I think that's a little bit harder to predict, right? Especially because they're looking to be above average in some of those statistics, right? So I think that's why some of these prediction tools tend to rank the Red Sox a little bit lower than average, right? That being said, I will say if these prediction tools are correct, the AL East is going to be a heck of a division, right? Because even their 15 Tampa Bay they have at minimum 500, right? Around 500, if not better than that. So potentially we could be looking at an AL East where the entire division is above 500. That would be quite a situation there, wouldn't it? It would lead to a bloodbath, between the five teams. I do agree with you. I think obviously the odds-on bet that the Blue Jays and Yankees are going to be battling it out at the very top. I don't think you should sleep on the Red Sox. I think they greatly improved their starting pitching staff, number one, which is going to make a big difference. I just think that that's not something to be overlooked. Their bullpen was really lights out last year, and I think it's only going to be better this year overall. I mean, I think Chapman's due for a little bit of regression, but I think some of the other arms are going to be improving, and that's going to balance that out. I think it's deeper than it was last year, that bullpen. And then the offense, like I said, if the World Baseball Classic is any indication, this offense is going to surprise some people even more than they already did. So I wouldn't
Yeah.
sleep on the Red Sox, and I wouldn't sleep on the Orioles either. I agree. Their lineup is fantastic. I don't know if they did enough with their pitching staff, and that's why I
Yeah.
have them in fourth. I just don't think they did what they needed to with that pitching. I mean, I've said that before in the past. Um, we'll see. And I would also say, and I'm sorry, Doug, if you're somewhere listening to this, but I wouldn't be shocked to see some regression from the Toronto Blue Jays too. I'm not to say that their roster isn't fantastic. It is. Yet I don't even know if
Yes.
they necessarily overperformed necessarily last year. I just wouldn't be shocked, especially as the rest of the AL East gets better. I wouldn't be shocked to see a little regression there. And I've said from the Yankees that a lot of their season is going to depend on how they weather some of that starting pitching depth and injuries in the beginning of the season. And if other
Yeah.
teams can capitalize on that in the beginning and build a little bit of lead on them, it's going to make you know, their so. I think a lot of how the Yankee season goes, we're going to see very early. If you guys can hold your own with that pitching staff for the first month or two, then it's going to be a long year for the rest of the AL East. If
Yeah.
we can build some sort of pad a little bit of a lead on you guys while you're still recovering a little bit, then I think that'll make it very intriguing. So we'll see. But
Yeah.
but I do have ultimately I'm gonna go out on a limb. I'm gonna say the Yankees win the division and the Red Sox are second in the division, and the Blue Jays fall down to third in the division this year with Baltimore and then the Rays fourth, fifth. But we'll see
Yeah.
whether that prediction pans out. I don't know. It'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see.
There were a lot of upgrades to Toronto and the Orioles as well. So those are two teams that you should really take a look at going into 2026. All right, so that brings us to the end of our show. Now we do have a little bit of an announcement that we want to make, just with regards to the future of the show. Like I said in the beginning, we are not going away. We are still here. We're obviously going to continue talking about baseball, but there's going to be a little bit of a shift in the content change. You will see a little less streams and you will see a little bit more pre-recorded content, a little bit more analytical breakdowns going forward, a little bit more short form content that you'll see pop up on YouTube, Twitter, so on and so forth, a little bit more on social media. The streams are not going away. We will continue streaming whenever we can. It's just going to be for large scale events like the trade deadline, opening day, big breaking news, so on and so forth. So we're not going away. We're still going to talk about baseball. We're still going to be here and just watching the season alongside you guys. So we just want to take the time to say thank you very much for watching our streams. Like I said, they will continue, just not at the rate that they've been going once a week. We will still come back and do large scale streams for big time events. You'll just see a little bit more pre recorded content from us, broken into some episodes going forward on the Stadium Rant YouTube channel and X accounts, as well as our personal accounts if you follow us there. All right. With that being said, thank you so much for tuning in on this Sunday evening, wherever you might be. We hope to be enjoying opening day with you relatively soon. So for Khris and I at Stadium Rant, this is Dirty Leather signing off, and we will see you next time, guys. Take care.
Have a good one.